The world is a pretty full magical place, and that's what I suppose when I said about acting and truth. Like, I think cinema should be able to equate what enormity of magic there is in real life.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Antonia Campbell-Hughes is an actor. She sat down with me in cyberspace to talk about the work. Is there a typical way that you like to begin your preparation process for a new character? Like, is there a first step that you typically take?
No, I didn't. When I first started, or as a child, people, the questions you're always asked are, did you always dream about being an actor or making films? I didn't know what an actor was. Like, I grew up in Switzerland and Germany, and the States a little bit, but when I was so young, mainly Switzerland and Germany. I didn't watch English language films or television. I ran around a forest. Like, I didn't know it was a job. And but I saw Terminator 2 in German, like when I was very, very young. And I recorded it on an audio cassette and listened to the German dubbing of Terminator 2 for about 4 years. And that was like my masterclass, I guess, in becoming an actor. Like, I thought everything hung from that. And I acted, I mean, I was like 9 or 10, but when I acted everything out, and I rode the bikes, and I was all the characters, and I did that in the forest for many years. So my education was slightly narrow. And but also I was very heavily influenced by Canal Plus. It was like the only TV station that I had, and they have wonderful films on Canal Plus. But so anyway, long story. And then I went to art school, and so when I had an agent from very young, so I was street cast in something, so I had an agent, but I literally thought actors were just like popular, pretty people, like at school. And so I just never thought it was for me. I was quite a punk artist about everything. And so then I sort of conformed and started doing some auditions that were sent. And I thought, how does one act? What does one do? So the only thing I knew was tell the truth. The only in I had was be the truth, think the truth, tell the truth of what's written on the page. And that's been my go-to pretty much since. But I used to be because I thought I was going to be found out, because I moved to London, and everybody, to have any opportunity, everyone went to RADA or Lambda or the best drama schools. And if you hadn't done that, you weren't in the ring for discussion. And so I did a play at the Royal Court, and once you've done some theatre, you sort of earned your stripes. But I always thought I was going to be sort of found out unless I was incredibly authentic. And so therefore I've never really understood things like craft, because amazing actors do have craft, but they learn it in acting classes and in drama school. And I don't really resort to that at all. I would have been, I would say, accused rather than of being quite method when I was started out. But again, my understanding of method is like act drunk, be drunk, etc. So that's not at all what I did. I think that's a more masculine approach. I just thought I have to embody the entirety of the emotional journey always and not stop. So there's no off. So that's what I would do. But now I have learned that I think ultimately your job as an actor is to serve the director and the writer and the job that's been handed to you, and to do your best to be as malleable and giving and intelligent with that givingness to the people whose vision you're trying to realize. And I think that now I very much feel that my approach has to be designed or malleable to the project. Like, it's about fitting into a company. So I think, there's no point in trying to suck the air from the space and be all about your own process. You have to match the other actors in your team.
it's so interesting that you started with what is the most important ingredient, right? I mean, truth, right? But
Yeah.
I can imagine how after you start to work with people who are using other ingredients and kind of finding favor with the director who is needing kind of a more performative performance. I'm talking about in, let's just say, things that are more commercial. Say you suddenly find yourself in, and then how do you not adapt those ingredients? How did you stick to having truth be the main food that you're eating?
No, it's a great question. And that's where I evolved, I suppose, because that's as my career went on and I was being put in different situations, exactly as you say, like when you're strapped up on wires and there's a green screen behind you and you're not a space invader, but it's a science fiction thing and you're playing an immortal angel thing. Truth is nice, but it's not going to do very much. Like you've got to push it, up the ante a little. So that's exactly, I learned on the jobs. And that's why now I don't have a specific go-to. I read the room.
But how did you not develop like bad habits, I guess?
I don't know. I think, because, I make films as well. And I'm very curious about actors. Especially since I started directing also. And like, I think actors are all quite different. There's kind of pools of different approaches and types. And I understand which ones are which and what the strengths are. And then there's the rare exception where people are just endlessly extraordinary. And I bow down at their altar. I think it's just a gift. And I really admire actors who have just such reach with craft. I really admire that because it's something I don't know so well and I've tried to learn from, but it's just so extraordinary. But then again, there's things like when I started out, accents were very much in my wheelhouse because I grew up speaking lots of languages, and so I could very authentically do like a wide range of accents, and I speak languages, so that was something that was my currency, I suppose. Whereas now, in the huge landscape that is television, it's very multilingual, it's very international. And so now actors from other European countries or, whatever demographics, they're speaking in English. Whereas it used to be that English actors or American actors would do an accent. Now they have the, authentic Algerian man or whoever it is. So what I was saying is when I started out, it's not just truth, but it's truth through a performance. The core is not just like, because ultimately I'm not really that much of a fan of sort of observational filmmaking, which is very, like the mumblecore and the shoegazer thing. I started out in things like that, and then I like to be challenged. I really love to be challenged and to be fearful and then overcome that.
You were talking somewhere about method, and about how someone might say that your method, and you were saying, but you don't necessarily draw on your own past or your own emotions to kind of play these emotions of this character. You just take on the situations of the character and the emotions of that character. I'm always fascinated by people that do it this way because it's a level of imagination, and I'm always in awe that there's enough in the well, I guess. It seems like the healthiest way to do it, but it seems like how could there be enough of just imagination to reach some of these dark places emotionally?
No, it's really interesting because I am very interested in actors that have had rich lives. Like I'm baffled by people who literally, have had a very comfy middle class life and nothing's gone wrong and then they perform. But that's just my failing to judge that, because I've had quite a big life, but I also know that I'm not a very emotional person. So like I'm quite tough. And so it's just very simply, if I'm playing a role and I'm playing a woman and she loves her cat and her cat dies, I don't think about my cat who died. I am just the woman who's upset about her cat who died. And the woman's upset, so I'm upset. That's the truth. If I'm invested enough, which is the only choice, if I'm invested enough in her and me as her and me representing her, and it's a constant, I can be upset about it. Antonia doesn't care about a cat that dies. And and but it's like, I know that because obviously when I started acting, and many times directors say to me, imagine something that happened to you, and they try and get you to draw from your own experiences, and that's the classic, and it works for many people. It doesn't work for me. It was like one day as a teenager, someone said, okay, you're gonna have to act now, and I went, oh my God, what is that acting thing? And I literally just had to wing it, and I came up with this concept, and that's what it is.
That's amazing. I mean, do you have to like people though? Because, do you have to like this person that you're imagining likes a cat?
Not at all. No.
I mean, how do you embody this person you can't relate to?
But I don't think you even have to have an opinion, do you?
That's why it works, I guess. This is why I suck. I'm just all opinions and judgments.
I actually, because people always said to me, how do you feel about playing unlikable characters? And I'm like, that's what's great. I love that. But again, it's because, where the brain can go and the deep kind of cavernous wells within the psyche that we don't choose to excavate, I find that really curious and interesting. And the layering that you can have with a performance, by really going into what the character might be feeling and hiding, like what's written on the pages. Often a character is written as feeling one thing and it's delivered. But most people don't operate that way. And most people have an emotion that they submerge.
Yes.
They try and equate with another, a secondary emotion that is how their initial emotion is perceived or in conflict with the outside world. And then they present a third. So that sort of makes it really interesting.
Yes, and they don't even know they're having that emotion because they're denying it or something.
Yeah.
So it's like being presented without them even knowing.
Completely.
Yeah. So I didn't know you at all when they sent me Cordelia. I started watching this, and something was going on with me that usually doesn't happen. When I'm watching Cordelia, I'm thinking like, I'm having all these things about this character's life that I'm fascinated by, but there is nothing that's happening tangibly yet that would make me interested. And I'm thinking, why is this happening? I think I forgive performances moment to moment. And then there's a truthful moment that feeds me and allows me to forgive all of these non-truthful moments. And then there's a truthful moment and it allows me to forgive. I'm forgiving. I think this is the way most of my viewing experiences. With you, I believe you moment to moment. I mean that. This was the first time of me seeing you and believing you moment to moment, and I don't know why that is. But that's what really intrigued me about this.
Well, it's funny because Cordelia, I played as a con artist.
You fooled me.
I fooled you. So basically, we meet Cordelia, and she's like this little kind of like mouse woman. This little diminutive, softly spoken, quite annoying mouse person. And that is the way I played her is that she's specifically chosen to behave this way because it is the misogynist public welcome to what they want a woman to be.
Oh,
so she's being this very soft, diminutive, feminine, like quite wet human because she can get through society unscathed and unseen because she's had this big traumatic experience. And it's an act. So then at the midpoint, when she has her sort of transformative moment and she goes to the countryside and comes back, that's when it's like the outside exoskeleton has peeled off and her true self. And I actually think that's the most true. I mean, I was much more free in her then. So what I worked on specifically, and I employed a lot more self-design craft. I couldn't tell you what the name of it is from whatever school, But I worked a lot on my physicality. I had like a lightness to her in the beginning, in the first half. I tried to make her very like like a whippet, like very like breath and shallow breath and later on when she sheds that performance, that kind of girly, kind of infantile almost depiction of the perfect wife material, weak female, when she sheds that, I changed the way she walked. I made her walk like a boxer. There's a strut. Yeah. There's an athleticism. I saw her more as like a panther. Yeah. And my voice changes, still English, but it takes a deeper resonance. And I felt much more free in that because it's more like she's tougher. It's kind of, I feel much more at ease in that. But a lot of people didn't quite, I really tried to go for quite an extensive layering. But then again, when she's at the second part, when she's with Frank, there's a performance in that too, because this is what I think is interesting about the gender aspect of Cordelia, is that she and Frank are the same. And I always thought with Cordelia, the gender, him being male and her being female, was sort of irrelevant and interchangeable, because they're both masking and presenting a version of themselves in the public arena. Like he is doing that kind of like, cheeky chappy like thing, this like London geezer guy thing, when underneath he's also isolated and confined by his own insecurities.
I'm really mad that they didn't send me It Is in Us All. I really want to see this movie because as I was researching you more and really respecting you as an artist more in different ways, and like hearing you talk about different things and relating with you artistically on things, and like I feel like we almost have the same taste in movies, I'm realizing, and stuff. I was like, all right, I really want to see. And then I saw the trailer, I was like, oh my God, like visually it just seems like when an actor directs, it's usually their early work, I guess, is not very visual.
Yeah. Ultimately, first of all, I wanted to make a film with no humans in it, no people. So because I find visual setups and like landscapes or material or the composition of a room much more emotive than two people talking to each other.
Interesting.
But that's not popular, and it's certainly not very commercial. So as much as my film isn't an obvious like crowd pleaser commercial entity, it it had to do the job of having a fully functioning narrative with characters, etc. But so visual would be my first go-to. It's very important to me. And when a lot of people storyboard for the kind of functionality of like camera angles and camera setups, and I did all that as well. But for me, a storyboard is to really make sure that the financiers, the budget was tiny, but the financiers know that, because obviously when people go through scripts and it comes to being a shooting script, they want to axe all the half-paged, which describes the landscape and the changing lighting. I'm like, no, that is integral to the progression of the plot and the narrative. And for me, it is everything. And about, a camera position in relation to the car tracking, where it's angled, if it's lower high, all those things, they change the mood, they change the tonality. And that is how I think. And that's what I've learned on 18 years of acting. I watch the sets. I know what every single department does. I think they're all as important as an actor or performance. And it is about a giant ship. And if you're directing, you're at the helm, obviously. But I think every department is as necessary as the actors.
Is this coming out? What's happening with this?
Well, it only premiered in March at South by Southwest, so I won the jury prize at that, and so because of that, and then reviews were very positive. So now I go to Sydney in a week. I'm one of the European film promotion directors of 2022. So Sydney, then oh gosh, when's this come out? I don't know what I'm allowed to say. Festival-wise, hasn't been announced.
Okay. But there's hope. There's hope for us to see this. There is hope.
Yeah. I think it's American. It will be announced this week. I think it has American distribution coming out in the fall.
Excellent.
And then UK is like Christmas.
Yeah. Something you said in another interview was it's important to you as a director to kind of not have rehearsal with people, to just tell me why that's important to you as a filmmaker. And I'm assuming it must be because that doesn't work necessarily for you as an actor.
Yeah. Did I say that? I must have said that. I think let's also remind ourselves that I've only made one film. So the thing is, I think what I do know is that, I suppose you have to help your actor in terms of what they need. I do know that's important. Let's say I was raised, I'm using air quotes, under the wings of directors who literally said that they're the boss and I must do what they say. That's how I learned. So I think there's a lot of, I'm choosing my word very carefully. My instinct is to choose the word spoiled, but that's damning. But actors who require quite a bit, I am from the world that you serve your director and you give them whatever you can to execute their vision. I think if a director wants me to rehearse, I rehearse. If a director doesn't want me to rehearse, I don't rehearse. That's how I feel. But as a director, I don't like rehearsal. I think you become too stuck. I think I don't like to improvise. I'm very much, I go by my script, and I know it's there for a reason. My script is very important, but I very much believe in studying and knowing the script very well, being very, very, very prepared, a certain amount of rehearsal in terms of blocking so that you're very comfortable in what you're shooting, but performance rehearsal, I just want to be able to tell my actor to approach it with a completely different mindset after a few go, that's very important. So they're not stuck in a mental space or an emotional space. So performance rehearsal comes in terms of like physical blocking execution. So that's handled because camera is very important, obviously, for me. I'm very into set builds and camera angles and, that's the visual as we've covered. But in terms of an actor, I don't want them to be locked into a certain emotional space or pitch.
You were talking somewhere about this apprehension that you had about, even though your part was small in your movie, you were worried about directing yourself or just appearing in the movie, wearing two hats, I guess. Yeah. As you go on, do you imagine a time where you as an actor will be in your own movies stress-free?
It's funny because especially this week, lots of people have said to me, "Oh, you're a triple threat." No, I'm not. I'm a director. I'm a one threat, single director, single threat. But what I realize is that it's just maybe it's like mumbling insecurity thing that we do. I used to always think if you deem to want to direct and you're an actor, also people won't take you seriously. Because I was in the fashion industry when I was a teenager, and when I moved to acting, there was a very strict, I was put on a podium and poked and told, choose, what are you? Are you in fashion or are you an actor? And I had to very much like cut one off, bury it, and move to the next. And so now when I'm being asked about being this triple threat thing, I kind of go, and I realize it's stupid. And a very dear friend of mine said to me the other day, she's like, because there's lots of actors turned directors, and I think they do it on a whim, some, not all. And she said, Jodie Foster. I thought, okay, now you've got me, you've got my attention. Because Jodie Foster really is, someone I deeply respect, someone who has worn many hats without showcasing it as like a trend. And I used to always say like Amy Seimetz and Caitlin Shields, because they would sort of do all things, and I really respected their work. And there's many European actor directors. But when my friend said that to me about Jodie Foster, it's because someone through the ages. And obviously, we all know about Ozark, and people from the cast directing, from Laura Linney across the board. And I think that just in terms of my film, the first script I submitted, it was like a scheme, it's like a competition or a scheme, a funding scheme that everyone applies for, and you try and, they award 6 directors, and that becomes 3, and then they produce 3. But there was no women in my film at all. So the fund was a women's fund. So I went, okay, then I'm going to make a film about men with only men in it. Firstly, no people, then men. And they said, you have to have a female in it. And so I thought, well, I will write a role, the character of one female, and she's almost like the voice of reason. And she pops in every so often, and she's like the voice of the audience, of the viewer. And she kind of brings reason. And I knew that I was sort of perfect to play this role, but I had a lot of to and fro and a lot of anxiety about whether I would be, whether it would seem arrogant or out of place, or whether it would make me take my eye off the ball. But then anyway, I embraced it and it was fun. But on the day, it was challenging. And it was interesting because I'd been in a film that a very wonderful female director, writer, producer, pop star directed and was in. And I watched her while she was doing it. And I watched the energy and how she was able to do it so successfully. Rare Beast, Billie Piper. And then, but what they had very cleverly done was they had done the development and pre-production all designed around the fact that she was going to have to be jumping behind the monitor and then in front of the camera. So there was time allocated for that. And there was she had a great trust with her DT. And so she did a great stand and a double. And so it was very much planned to execute that. And so now I would just park my, self-deprecation, get over that. But if I were to do it again, I would definitely own it, I suppose, and make the time, because I think it does need extra time. When people do it, like, it's fascinating how I'd love to shadow or to be a fly on the wall for Ozark and to see how they manage time management.
Right.
I'm in a show, a very big show, and it was suggested to me what I want to direct some episodes, and I thought, how on earth would that be possible? I wear it's period, I have a big wig and a big old dress. How would I run? How would I run around the place? Practically, But yeah.
Do you have something that you do when you're not working that kind of feeds your artistic self, nourishes your inner artist?
People always just say to me, do you have a hobby? And I said, yes, it's writing and making films. That's my hobby. But it's just because I think it's so all-encompassing. Like I have to do things to try and make my brain stop. The only thing that makes my mind stop is driving, is one. But what I do find is lockdown was an interesting time because I've always been a night walker. Like since I was a teenager, since a kid, I walk cities at night. I really like walking around. So I always lived in cities. And in this time of pandemic, because I was in pre-production of my film, I was in where I shot it, which is in the vast northern tip of Ireland, where there was nothing. And I would get up at 5 a.m. and I would climb hills and walk in torrential rain. And I discovered that was a wonderful space for my head. Like it literally made me feel even more alive. Like I feel quite profoundly alive. And I'm fascinated by some people who just kind of go through the humdrum of life. Everything feels very enormous to me. But I realized that was food. And not to be very dull about it, but nature. I mean, I can't believe I actually said the word nature, but there you go. But I mean, but it is like the world is a pretty full, magical place. And that's why I suppose when I said about acting in truth, like I think cinema should be able to equate what enormity of magic there is in real life.
Antonia Campbell-Hughes, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham, formerly IFP. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.